everyone, and welcome to the Doors and Dialogue, a conversation on eliminating racial disparities in public safety and policing. On behalf of the Association of Vanderbilt Black Alumni and the Vanderbilt Alumni Association, thank you for joining us. My name is Valerie Williams, and I currently serve as AVBA President. We are thrilled to engage in this meaningful discussion tonight. If you have any questions during tonight's webinar, please use the Q&A function to send in your questions. And at the end of the presentations, I will ask our panelists as many questions as time allows. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers for tonight's event. As each panelist is introduced, they will share a brief overview on their connection to tonight's topic. Dr. André Churchwell is the Vice Chancellor of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer for Vanderbilt University. He is the inaugural Levi Watkins Chair, Chief Diversity Officer for Vanderbilt University Medical Center, and Senior Associate Dean for Diversity Affairs in the Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. Dr. Churchwell is a professor of medicine and cardiology, a professor of radiology and radiological sciences, and professor of biomedical engineering. Dr. Churchwell graduated from the Vanderbilt School of Engineering, magna cum laude, in 1975. He won the Biomedical Engineering Student Program Award that same year. He received his medical degree from Harvard Medical School in 1979 and later completed his internship, residency, and cardiology fellowship at Emory University School of Medicine and affiliated hospitals in Atlanta, Georgia. In addition, he was the first African-American chief medical resident at Grady Memorial Hospital from 1984 to 1985. Please join me in welcoming our own Dr. André Churchwell.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you very much. Well, welcome everyone to this evening. I appreciate the AVBA and our DAR committee has pulled us together to talk about this really important topic, a conversation on eliminating racial disparities in public safety and policing. As you're aware, being Vice Chancellor of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, I'm concerned about all things connected to racial inequities. The public safety and policing is just one. We, throughout the campus, are concerned about certainly racial and health inequities. Being a physician, we face that in the medical school and medical center. We are often and also concerned about racial crime and punishment and justice inequities that are faced by people of color in this country. There are certainly racial inequities around educational opportunities and a whole host of other things that fall under that rubric of racial inequities. So we're going to talk about and look at and examine the issues around public safety and policing here. We're going to look at it from a 50,000 foot level. And I have my colleagues here to help walk us through that and share their personal experiences, their programs in place, and some of the things that we're doing here at Vanderbilt. What I'd like to do, though, is start beginning with kind of what I call guiding principles. Next slide, please. We have to have guiding principles to drive our thinking and the way we think about projects and plans, strategic or otherwise. And I use these tools in my office and share this with my partners, whether it be vice chancellors or vice provosts such as William Robinson or such as or Chief August Washington, who works with us very closely on our policing. You have to have something that you use that helps you make decisions that you can hang on to, that keep it grounded in principles. So next slide. So this comes from a 30-year set of experiences working in the EDI space, both in the medical schools at Emory and Vandy, in the medical center at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, and of course, more recently, just in this year or so, here at Vanderbilt University. And I've learned this kind of the hard way or through practice and experiences. Some of this is evidence-based too, that EDI must be centerpiece of our ethos here, that we can't think and make decisions, tough decisions, to move the university forward if we don't consider equity, diversity, inclusion as a key part of our ethos here. EDI has such importance that you cannot do enough in this space. As you know, it's similar to pushing that boulder of racial prejudice up the hill we've been trying to do all these years. Once you stop pushing it, it rolls back down. So you cannot do enough to keep pushing the thing forward, pushing progress forward, pushing programs forward, pushing ideas forward that actually move the dime, move the whole needle around EDI. everybody should have some aspect of this. I should own some, but partner with all. I've learned the most that if people think I'm the sole owner of EDI or Vice Provost Robinson, then they don't have to do anything. So one of the key guiding principles that we have here at Vanderbilt that helps us think about this as we partner with our VCs and our deans and our chairs, that everyone has to have ownership in this to some extent, okay? And so I partner with everybody, bringing our best practices, our concepts around EDI, around climate and culture, around programs, around educational programs too. And so as we talk about what we do here, we must always talk about EDI as a key part of our guiding principle. And once again, EDI is a core value that needs to be owned by everyone here on our campus, include staff, students, faculty, and the like. Next slide. And one other key point is that it's interlocked. Those key guiding principles, they feed off and have a positive feedback loop on each other. If you break the circle apart, then they're less effective. So you must have them as part of an interlocking guiding principle network that continuously rotate and are positively feeding off of each other, making us better as a university. Next slide. And then this is a key slide that will be my last one here. And this is my concept of our organizational diversity continuum. Where are we on our path to try to embolden ourselves around doing more in EDI, whether it be in policing and safety, or whether it's around climate and culture, or whether it's around academic programs, or fostering a more diverse student body and faculty. This is our kind of, where are we in that path? Well, years ago, not now, we were monocultural, 1950s and 60s, exclusive club that was monocultural, predominantly white. And those things that were done early on were viewed as tokenism or lip service around diversity and inclusion. But over the 80s and 90s, as we've grown in this, up that inclining slope, as I've pointed out, you should also imagine pushing the boulder of racism, prejudice, misogyny, anti-Semitism, that boulder we keep pushing up the slope to the point of being, point of belonging. We've had to encounter some other things along the way to improve us in this journey, such as being convinced that diversity and inclusion is a key issue that needs to be involved in all our decision making. Having a critical mass of people here on the campus involved in diversity and inclusion in all of our schools and all of our administrative practices. Recognizing that we have to not just tolerate diversity and inclusion, but recognize it has power to make us better. And we have to then start looking at the issues around equity. And we've talked about equity as educational. We've also talked about it around policing here too. And along the way, recognizing we value diversity in all its forms, not just race, ethnicity, but cognitive diversity, geographic diversity, age diversity. And along the way, hopefully at some point, we reach that top of the line where we have belonging, where people can bring their authentic selves here to Vanderbilt. And we're very far along on our journey. I would say we're about 3/4 along, but we have more to do. And that boulder of racism and prejudice and anti-Semitism and misogyny and homophobia still requires all of us on this call to put our shoulders to that boulder and push it, because it has been mostly pushed by people of color. And what I'm excited about and what has led to this type of discussion, we've had other discussions like this, and we have a lot of allies now who are committed to pushing that boulder with us so that we can actually push it up that slope and get to that point of belonging. And it has to involve multi-generational people. It has to involve people of all race and ethnicities, ages, and points of origin. And I'm glad to see that. And we notice that in the protest movements that have been occurring across the country. Thank you. So we can go back to the full screen now. As I end my opening remarks, I'd like to make the case that the issue around disparities in policing have certainly been magnified since 2012, since Trayvon Martin's unfortunate death, and then obviously more recently with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and the like. They've really put the focus, the sharp spotlight on the issues of policing in this country, and have led to this Black Lives Movement and other movements that have looked carefully at policing in our cities. And certainly we know that there are issues within city policing that need to be addressed. All of us feel certain of that. And it has brought the spotlight from not just the cities, but what we're doing on our campuses. And that's what this discussion is about. We have to look at that and look at what we're doing here. The important aspects of this, as I finish my remarks, is recognize that Vanderbilt actually owns its police department. It's actually service around this area. It's not, it has connections to the Metropolitan Police Department, but this is a Vanderbilt service, a Vanderbilt department. And we're thankful of that. And we've had great leadership from Chief August Washington and his whole team around this. And it's important that because it's a university owned and supported venture, it is committed then to those key factors and attributes that we think are important. The commitment to a preventive focus, a commitment to our guardian focus, less so interventions and the like, a commitment to humane treatment of students, faculty, and staff. But more importantly, being part of a university that's involved in discovery, research, and the like, we are committed to continuous quality improvement. And Chief Washington's going to talk about that. And because of our university, we're involved in continuing education to make our practices the best practices as we go forward with our policing and our prevention in this matter. So tonight we'll hear from Chief August Washington as he outlines and describes our history and our path to where we are now around a more humane and thoughtful approach to policing and prevention here on this campus. We'll also hear from my colleague, Vice Provost William Robinson, as he outlines and shares information about the demographics of our campus, which are certainly changed in terms of race and ethnicity over decades. That focuses our whole attention on EDI even stronger, doesn't it? And I think between my two colleagues, you'll have an idea about the call to action that we have taken upon ourselves to look at this in a more introspective way and to bring to you and bring to our students and faculty and people we serve our best practices on policing and prevention. So I will end at my point, and I will now pass it back to Valerie so she can introduce our next guest. You're muted, Valerie.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Churchwell, for that wonderful presentation. Our next panelist is Dr. William H. Robinson. Dr. Robinson is the Vice Provost for Academic Advancement and Executive Director of the Provost Office for Inclusive Excellence. He is also a professor of electrical and computer engineering at Vanderbilt University. He also works to advance the Provost's priorities, focusing on the areas of faculty recruitment, retention, and development, student success, curriculum, and a culture of respect, dignity, and care. Dr. Robinson joined the Vanderbilt University faculty as an assistant professor after earning a PhD in electrical and computer engineering and a master's of science in electrical engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology. He earned his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. William Robinson.
Thank you very much for that introduction. So it's interesting hearing my own bio because I still think of myself as this little kid who took this picture in front of his grandmother's house. So this is actually from my hometown, WAUCHULA, Florida, which is in the middle of Central Florida, not necessarily near anything. And the journey to get from that town to be a vice provost here at Vanderbilt certainly is one that's, I wouldn't have imagined at that time, but it also taught me a few lessons in terms of how to interact and how to hopefully lead and serve in this way. WAUCHULA is interesting though. So WAUCHULA, I happened to look on a map, and WAUCHULA looks like this. This is literally all of the businesses, the major ones that are in WAUCHULA. I remember growing up and thinking that we had arrived when we got our McDonald's and our Walmart. And interestingly enough though, there are certainly lessons that I learned growing up in this town, in essentially a rural part of Florida. And so on the bottom, towards the bottom of the diagram where there's a Beal's store that's there, that's actually our neighborhood. And we didn't necessarily call it the neighborhood. That's actually just where the Black people lived. And I remember my mom and my dad telling the story of, how in like the late 70s, early 80s, how it was such an uproar when they had the audacity to actually go look for a house that was in a white neighborhood. But all of those things add up in terms of life experiences. And so one of the things that we're doing at Vanderbilt is we have a workshop. We had partnered with Cook Ross to have trainers that were available. And what we were trying to get people to understand is that we all have bias. We all have life experiences. We all have these lenses based upon our own life, our own experiences, as well as what we see in the media, as well as the books that we're reading, the movies, the media that we have. And whether it's our identities that we have, they all are additive. They all become these glasses, these lenses through which we see the world. And so in our conversation today, that's part of what we'll talk about in terms of how we're interacting with policing and campus safety, but how we're interacting with each other. How do we view each other's humanity going forward? And so I want to take a little bit of time and talk about Vanderbilt's commitment and how we're demonstrating that work. One of the things, there's certainly a lot of work going across the institution, whether in the colleges and schools, whether it's more formally in Dr. Churchwell's office, my office, or campus safety. What we ended up doing was creating what we're calling an inclusion web portal. It's a way of actually providing that information to our campus community, our alumni, our faculty, our staff, our postdoctoral scholars, our students, showing that information, showing the good work that's there, and giving them a way of accessing those resources. Within that, let me talk a little bit about my particular office. I lead the Provost Office for Inclusive Excellence, and that is in the Provost area, which is really our academic focus. My colleague, André Churchwell, leads the Office for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and he gave you the view of Vanderbilt as a whole. My area really focuses on the academic mission. So we look at academic advancement, belonging, inclusivity, as well as culture awareness in both education and practice for our academic areas and our academic units. So I have partners with the other vice provosts, the deans of the colleges and schools, where we're really trying to build a sustainable infrastructure. We're really trying to put the practices in place, the structure, change the culture, so that way we're making Vanderbilt more inclusive and working towards the commitment that was outlined by the chancellor and provost and chief diversity officer on July 1. And so within my portfolio, my office, there are our 4 identity centers. The Black Cultural Center, LGBTQI Life, the Women's Center, and Religious Life. And those are essential hubs for our campus communities and those various identities to provide resources, whether it's for academics, whether it's cultural support, collaborating across identities intersectionally in that way. But in addition to that, we also launch out of my office what we're calling identity initiatives for other communities, such as our Latinx community, or maybe it's our community with disabilities. Could be our scholars who identify as first generation scholars. And so those are other resources that we provide through my office and partnering again with other campus partners that we would see in, say, the Dean of Students office across the Provost area. One of the things, though, is at least want to talk about why those things are in place. And that's essentially because our demographics have changed. As mentioned in my bio, I've been at Vanderbilt since 2003. And one of the things I've noticed, certainly with Opportunity Vanderbilt since 2008, the demographics certainly have shifted among our student body. I'd like to be able to say that our faculty demographics have shifted just as quickly. We're still working on that part of it, but certainly in terms of our community of students, our undergraduates, graduate professional students, Vanderbilt is certainly more diverse. We are certainly have some more work to do on that, but I think we have made great efforts and great strides to bring people to our campus. Now the harder part becomes working on inclusion and belonging, as outlined by Dr. Churchwell. How do we ensure that people can bring their authentic selves to campus? And that's one of the areas that I think we'll move into in terms of the Q&A, but our students are certainly active in terms of bringing their identities to the discussion. They are active in terms of their lenses and how they view the world. And I think we've certainly had a chance to engage with them in this learning environment, in this university setting, in order to make Vanderbilt better. And so with that, I think that is probably my last slide. I certainly want to turn it back over to Valerie to continue, but happy to serve on this panel and looking forward to the Q&A.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson, for that wonderful presentation. Next, we will have our third panelist, Chief August J. Washington. He is the Senior Associate Vice Chancellor for Public Safety and Special Initiatives at Vanderbilt University. Chief August serves as the administrator in planning, directing, and managing the comprehensive law enforcement, the general services, the dignitary protection, and emergency preparedness services to all components of Vanderbilt University, including the academic campuses, the Vanderbilt University Medical Center, the Vanderbilt Children's Hospital, the 100 Oaks campus, and a number of Vanderbilt-owned facilities throughout the Davidson County area. He also oversees residential life security, workforce safety, fire safety, operational continuity, parking, and transportation services. In addition to those duties, he is over diversity and inclusion efforts and workforce development. His career progression includes over 38 years of law enforcement experience in the municipal and campus environments. He joined Vanderbilt in August of 2009. Please join me in welcoming Chief August J. Washington.
Thank you, Valerie. I truly appreciate the introduction, and I also appreciate the opportunity to come before you guys today and before the alumni. You know, when I serve on panels with Dr. Churchwell and individuals such as Dr. Robinson alike, I'm always amazed of what great shape Vanderbilt is in when we have people that are so concentrated on the diversity efforts, and it just I have great appreciation for that. And as Valerie introduced me, and it seems like when I listen to that, I'm over a lot of stuff, but the primary areas of responsibility has always started with Vanderbilt public safety being police services and security services. And it's something that we're very interested in today. You know, we're in a very interesting time in America, and we have a very interesting climate that surrounds policing and security. And one of the things as I go through my presentation, I just want to share with you that keep in mind that Vanderbilt has the privilege of having its own university police department that relies within the Department of Public Safety here at Vanderbilt. And it's, you know, and our intent is to be uniquely different from a municipality. Vanderbilt University Public Safety Department is a fully comprehensive university police department, and it's one of the most diverse departments on the Vanderbilt University campus. And I'm proud to say that our agency diversity reflects the community and the progression of diversity within Vanderbilt over the past 11 years. Our mission and platform for the Public Safety Department is based upon service to our entire community. Our dedication to service is based upon principles of professionalism, integrity, transparency, and a commitment to treating individuals with respect and dignity. Vanderbilt Public Safety is triple accredited. They're one of the only university police departments in the country that is accredited through state, national, and international. And they also have a 4th level of accreditation in their communications area. And the last time I checked, we were only one of 3 universities in the United States that have that level of accreditation. And our accreditation demonstrates our commitment to best practices in law enforcement services, but more particularly or specifically to services in public safety on a university campus. Our intent is to make this area safe with minimal disruption to the academic process. Our agency actively works to train our personnel to foster a culture of inclusion and care where every member of our community feels protected and safe. Some of that training include, but it's not limited to, disruptive everyday bias, which comes from Dr. Churchwell's area, bias-based policing, ethics, unconscious bias, de-escalation, and diversity. Our staff has also participated in a program that I'm very proud of called Blue Courage, where we initially was kind of skeptical about the program just because of the title, being courage. But when we looked into it, the courage was mostly involved in having the ability to intervene and to serve people and to treat people fairly, to have, and it's a shame to say, but today it takes courage to do that. And one of the areas of true benefit for us, it was an area which we really worked diligently on, is training our officers to intervene in cases where fellow officers are using excessive force. And if you look around this country today, and a lot of the issues that we see involving policing and excessive force, you'll see police officers standing around. So Vanderbilt took it on themselves to work with a program that specifically trained individuals to intervene and not to allow that to happen. Vanderbilt Public Safety has also recently established a policy that prohibits the use of any type of restraint techniques or restricts an individual's airflow or ability to breathe, in an effort to further emphasize that that type of behavior will not be tolerated at VUPS, a department directive has been established that specifies that these type of restraints shall not be used at any time, and doing so will result in immediate termination. When I first became police chief at Vanderbilt 11 years ago, I immediately began to foster an environment within the department that is 100% committed to service to our community, with a mission to treat every member of our diverse community with fairness and without prejudice. This commitment to that mission is even more crucial today than it was 11 years ago. A proud area of development of our department has been the improvement of our department's diversity. A positive change in our diversity is a result of the department's commitment toward upward mobility and developing our teammates to specifically serve Vanderbilt and its surrounding community. Back in 2009, when I arrived, Vanderbilt demographics of the public safety department was 87% white, 12% African-American, 1% Hispanic, and 2% other. And of those, 12%, only 12% were female. Today, and Vanderbilt represents in the state of Tennessee, we're the most diverse department there is. And we are currently where we have 54% of our personnel are white, 38% is African-American, 8% Hispanic, and of those, 32% are female. But one of the interesting things about our department is a lot of departments will promote diversity, but Vanderbilt not only promotes diversity within the department, but they promote diversity within upward mobility. Recently, we had 6 promotions to what we call a captain in our department, of which 4 were African-American and 3 were female. And so we are committed to not only having a diverse department, but to also have a department that allows for upward mobility of our personnel. And some recent changes within the department has been the improvement of our policies. We've adapted President Obama's 21st Century Policing, the A Can't Wait, where its adaptation was intended to reduce police violence in America by 72%. Vanderbilt has established a core committee, which is a community-oriented results and expectation committee. And it's kind of a form of an oversight committee. It's a committee that actually keeps us engaged with our community and also addresses our policies, our procedures, and our practices. And we currently, at this time, Dr. Roosevelt Noble from the Black Cultural Center serves as the chair of that committee. Back in 2018, we did an improvement to our Alert VU system, which is under the Clery Act, which most of you may be aware of. There's a requirement for certain notices when crimes are committed on or about the campus. One of the things we found that a number of our notices over time, we had often used the term Black male or a description that tended to put some of our significant number of our residents or members of our community in a sense of anxiety, because every time we would put out a notice, it would have Black male. And these notices that when we took a look at them, did not really demonstrate true effectiveness in apprehending anyone that have actually participated in a crime. So we took it upon, and through conversations with our community, we changed it. And since 2018, November, we have refrained from using race in these security notices. One of the other programs that we've established recently was our ambassador program. One of the things that we've noticed in law enforcement is that we have a lot of things going on where we have police involved in certain situations that we probably don't need to have the police. And so as we started to deal with this pandemic and also to return the campus program, we were charged with the responsibility of encouraging compliance by the university for its return to work program. And in doing so, we did not want to create a program where we would have a COVID police or a mass police out there. So we really took a look at our program, and we ended up creating a program called Ambassadors. And we have members of our security team that we went away from security style uniforms. We moved to a much more softer uniform where they wear khaki pants, polo shirts, and tennis shoes. And their objective was to encourage compliance rather than to identify violations. Another area of our program that we're very proud of is the development of our CSO program, which is our Community Service Officer program. When I arrived here at Vanderbilt in 2009, Vanderbilt had 137 sworn police officers and only 5 security guards. And we've decided that our program was more centered around enforcement rather than service. And so we decided to enhance our security program, and we titled it Community Service Officer, where we wanted to have personnel that was their whole objective was to serve the community. Again, rather than just identifying violation or enforcement. And so today we have 87 police officers, which is a 50 police officer reduction over the course of 11 years. And now we have about 150 community service officers. And all that was done during a time where Vanderbilt University Medical Center, which is another part of our responsibility, expanded their services, our need for services. And so over the course of 11 years, we had a reduction of right at 50 police officer positions. These changes, we feel, have been positive in contributing to our department being more service-oriented rather than enforcement-minded. And with that, I'll conclude, but I also welcome any questions, and I truly appreciate the invitation to participate in this very important discussion.
Thank you to all of our panelists. We're going to move directly into our question portion, and bear with us. We have a number of questions, and we're going to get to them in the order that they were submitted. And we're going to get through as many as we can. In the event that we can't answer all of them, we will try and ask for answers. We'll get written responses out to the participants. So first question, based on the current climate of our time, do you foresee further change in how the university addresses inclusivity through its leadership to impact the students?
Have to unmute there. Thank you, Valerie. I'll start off with that one. Yeah, I think it's when William and I stepped in our roles a little bit over a year ago, it was clear to me that though there had been work done to build an inclusive culture, and we certainly had moved the ball along in the work of Emeritus Chancellor Zeppos and Provost Winty was just phenomenal in that regard. But we took a hard look at the fact that we needed to begin to work on culture and climate on bias, unconscious bias in particular. And we recognize that you can't deliver on the promise or potential of diversity and have anything around inclusion if you don't deal with individual issues that we have, personal issues that we have with people different from us. And these are things we bring to us from our own grandparents, our parents, our communities that are very unconscious. And they form and shape the way we look at people, and we make snap decisions or judgments based on the training that we receive from our communities. And so we took time, as William pointed out, to have a formalized unconscious bias process put in place. We brought the leading voice of that group, Howard Ross, out of retirement, to initially deal with leadership. So we spent a whole day, 8 to 4, with the chancellor, the vice chancellors, all the deans, all the key vice provosts, and then we underwent a very intense day-long session, overview session that Mr. Ross led. And that was really the way to begin to make the case to the rest of the university of how important this is. And so we began creating a set of train-the-trainers that involve not just faculty trainers, but student-trained trainers as well as staff. And we've been working on that consistently. We actually started this in the medical center, about 8 years ago under my leadership there. And we're up to 5,000 people, staff, faculty, students trained, and we're over 1,000 now in less than a year here on the Vanderbilt University side of faculty, staff, students. And August's team has been involved in that. So you can't really deliver on diversity or inclusion in any way unless we really work on that. That isn't, it's a necessary but not sufficient thing, because it has to be repetitive. It has to be built in with other programs that Williams' office is involved in around inclusive excellence training too. But that's one big thing we've done. The other thing I would let William talk about is a lot of the work in those identity centers are around building more inclusions, particularly for the students from different marginalized or different races and also ethnicities. William, you want to chat about that again?
Thank you. Sure, I'll add to that. So I think in terms of supporting our students, certainly in terms of each of the identity centers, that's one of the core missions that they would serve our students, not just undergraduates, but graduate students, professional students as well. They have a plethora of programs, whether it's the academic part, whether it's also the social and belonging that you put together. So for example, maybe it's students who are in STEM, who are looking at the academic success and those first year courses in math and science and having programs in place to provide access and improve their academic performance that way. I think also one thing I was going to mention in terms of kind of the structure that we're putting in place is just the network across the different units on campus. So I have what we call the Dean's Diversity Designates, and that's someone who's in the leadership of each of the 10 colleges and schools who's designated as a liaison for issues around equity and inclusion. I think Dr. Churchwell has a similar in terms of the units at the vice chancellor level where it's liaisons. And again, this is the idea that it can't just be Dr. Churchwell's office, it can't just be my office, it can't just be me as a champion, it can't just be Andre as a champion. It has to be collective. It has to be where we all take part of this, we all take ownership of it. And I think that's one of the things that, as far as our structure, I think we've put that in place and we continue to work on that to ensure that it gets pushed down into the various units and the colleges and the schools and the vice chancellor areas. It gets pushed into, throughout our community, throughout the various groups, our faculty, staff, students, and alumni as well.
I want to add a couple other things before we go to the next question. From a very high level, it was very clear to me we needed to do a deep dive into what we're doing in equity, diversity, inclusion in the colleges, in the schools. And we had not done that in a really formalized way. And so we did a 6-month, 8-month, pretty hard deep dive asking the deans to answer some tough questions, some narrative questions around how they develop pipelines around diverse students, retention programs, community engagement programs outside of the walls of the university into our diverse communities. And William, myself, and our team came up with about a 500-page document that we finished putting together at the end of the summer. And we have been over the last few months actually meeting individually with the deans, looking at the contents and the results of that document, primarily looking at best practices we can glean from the schools to then share with the individual deans. So there are a number of good things being done by our deans and our chairs. And so we've called those out to now share and to augment and to support with our deans and all the schools. So I think there are a number of things that are kind of underway to try to build that more inclusive environment, to fortify that. And that's certainly an important piece. Thank you, Valerie. We could go on, but that's probably enough.
Okay, next question. What proactive steps has Vanderbilt taken throughout the city of Nashville to address police brutality and improve communications relationships between law enforcement and citizens, particularly those residing in underprivileged urban areas?
August, that may be yours, and that might be useful to talk about a little bit more the relationship between VU and the Metro Police Department and that.
Yes.
That particular connection.
One of the things is when you talk about policing, Vanderbilt, again, and I said this earlier in my comments, that Vanderbilt has a fully comprehensive police department that resides here on the campus. But we fall under the what we call a memorandum of understanding of the Metropolitan Police Department. And early on in my tenure here at Vanderbilt, when I came here, Vanderbilt officers used to be trained by Metro back in 2009. So every police officer that was on Vanderbilt campus had to go through the Metropolitan Police Department's academy. And when I came, one of the things I realized is that the academy and the training that they were receiving was not pretty much, to me, it was not, directing them to be trained to operate on a college campus. It was almost municipal police officer training that was more specific to Metro Nashville. So I had a conversation with Chief Ron Serpis and Chief Stephen Anderson back then. And I talked about, the need for us to break that part of the relationship. And some people were real concerned about that, but I thought it was very necessary because I think what we needed in the Vanderbilt community was a department that was really focused around service more than enforcement. But I'll share this with you when to be more specific to your question. I think policing in general should be focused around service than enforcement. And I think that's part of the challenge that we're facing today. And I think that, when you talk about Vanderbilt, is we do have a very service-oriented department, and we continue to develop our department to be where it can be more service-oriented to the community. And I think that as of recent, the assignment of Chief John Drake at Metropolitan Police Department, I think Nashville is going to see a much more service-oriented department. But our connectivity is that we do fall under their privy, under the sense of the memorandum of understanding.
Valerie, may I add just one quick piece before we go on? One important thing that people need to keep their eyes on, the chancellor with the Board of Trusts has created a Board of Trusts subcommittee on equity, diversity, inclusion, and that'll be a permanent standing subcommittee that will be working with myself and our office to look at issues on EDI that will require even more senior leadership involvement. So I think that gives you a sense of how important EDI is in the mind of the chancellor and of our leaders of this great university.
Thank you. Next question. Are there any examples of faculty research or activism in the area of racial disparities in public safety that you can speak to?
August, you have any, or William? I think William,
Yeah.
why don't you go first?
I think I can handle that one. So actually, there's a lot of research that's going on campus. One of the grand challenges in the College of Arts and Science, I think, is being led by Professor Paul Taylor, and he is a faculty member in philosophy. And so his grand challenge is actually on, I think the title is Racial Justice, the Third Reconstruction. And so he's getting that started, and I believe that André and I have a meeting with him tomorrow to discuss some of that research. Later this week, one of our colleagues, Rich Milner, has I think a conference that's being held on race and education. And so, if I'm not mistaken, I think in the spring semester, Dr. Roosevelt Noble is teaching a class on policing Black bodies. So I think there's a number of scholars on campus who have participated in the research and the scholarship in this area. And one of the things I think is important is that the Chancellor's office established a research award in this area in terms of research in equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so that was established maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So that way that work is being celebrated and recognized for the scholarship that it has achieved.
Thank you. We're going to move to the next question. What do you feel is the most important thing that alumni can do to help eliminate racial disparities in public safety in their own communities?
I can take that.
August, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think engagement. I think that one of the things I always tell people is that I think policing in America was created by the people, for the people, with an intent to serve the people. So I think far too often we look at something that's not working and we just push it away. I think engagement. I think engagement and working with your community and demanding that you have a department that is not only through demographics, represent your community, but also the way your community is served. And I think that alumni, Vanderbilt put out some of the best and the brightest minds in America. So I think having that type of engagement, that get involved. My biggest fear right now is that we're at a place where policing has become what I call denobilized. It's losing its nobility. And I think people are looking at it where we can just turn away from it. I think not. I believe that we have to engage. We have to participate in this process to bring forth change and mandate change, demand change. And the only way to get that change is engagement, and be a part of oversight committees, be a part of core committees, be a part of community relations group that intervene with the police department and mandate that, that officers are trained appropriately, that people are treated appropriately. And so what I would say to alumni, to graduates, is engagement.
One thing spin off that's really important for our parents and alumni who don't live in Nashville, that just happened here in Nashville. We have a new police chief that'll be working with August, and he's an African-American who had a past track record of reaching out to the community and being more community engaged, and a local young man who's done well. And I think his track record probably changes the whole venue in terms of how Nashville will be looking at policing, and will probably embrace maybe more of some of the policies and practices that the VU police are doing, we would hope at least.
One of the things, and I just want to make a comment on that, is that he's welcomed the Citizens Oversight Board. And I think that's really important because, one, the people spoke. That was a referendum that was voted upon. And so that the community stated that they wanted to have a Citizens Oversight Board and that the police chief is going to work with them. And I think that's extremely important.
Thank you. What role does the recently formed University Diversity Council play in conversations around eliminating racial disparities on campus?
Well, I'll start, but then William and I both co-lead that, so he'll jump in too. About over a year ago, working with the provost, actually interim chancellor at the time, Susan Wente, and provost, William and I and Susan realized that we needed a more centrally located council that included faculty, students, undergraduate students, and now alumni and postdoctoral students and graduate students to inform us on those policies, practices around EDI that we need to be aware of. We have certainly things that we bring to the university as programs and practice, but this is a group that we created that's very proximal, that William and I lead, and the result of their comments are then filtered up and delivered to the provost and the chancellor. And a great example of the work from last year's University Diversity Council, it was the July 1st statement that was released by the chancellor as well as myself and the provost. A number of things that were mentioned in that particular statement are echoes or either results or recommendations from the first University Diversity Council that we ushered in last year. William, you want to add anything else, any color commentary?
Sure.
To that?
So because of the representation and to have a number of voices on campus, it is a large committee. And so they're divided in subcommittees in order to really focus in on particular areas. And so this year, the council is aligned with the July 1st statement. And really they're charged with taking a look at the progress that we made, perhaps the progress that we haven't made, and being able to provide recommendations. And so certainly they're in that feedback loop to see whenever we've released, say, we released our annual report on equity, diversity, and inclusion that says, here are the things that have happened in the past year or two or so, what more needs to be done? Where are the things that have arisen now that weren't considered before that we needed to pay attention to? So for example, health disparities, and obviously the pandemic has put a new lens on that area. So being able to look at that, being able to look at how Vanderbilt economically is able to influence and provide opportunities for businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses. I think that council is able to provide those recommendations and really address those topics. And because it's a council that goes to both the chancellor and the provost, it has direct, essentially a direct line of communication through that. So their recommendations would be heard.
Thank you. What activities or collaborations are occurring between Vanderbilt and local HBCUs, specifically Fisk, Meharry, TSU, and American Baptist College?
Great. Well, William will jump in on this one, but certainly from ABC, Forrest Harris, the president of ABC, is a faculty member and part of the Kelly Miller Smith Institute here in the Divinity School. So there's direct connectivity right there. The longstanding, well-recognized and nationally recognized Fisk Bridge program, which is a program between Fisk and Vanderbilt to create PhDs in astrophysics, African-American PhDs in astrophysics. And that's been around for over 20 years or so, and is the leading producer of African-Americans with PhDs in the astrophysics arena. And so we also have created through the medical school a African-American disadvantaged student pipeline program that's working with Fisk, but not just Fisk alone, but Berea College in Kentucky, a unique college there, as well as Morehouse College and Spelman College in Atlanta, with the idea of recognizing we don't have a deep and sufficient number of African-American physicians either practicing or either working in academic medicine. We took it upon ourselves with the help of our dean and president CEO, Jeff Balzer at the medical school, to create a set of programs that bring these kids out of the rising sophomore status into summer programs with the idea of enriching their academic experiences enough that they can enter either Vanderbilt or other competitive peer schools. And so we've been working on that for 4 or 5 years. But there are other programs too that, William, I'll let you add some color.
Yeah, actually, I think you did a pretty good job of hitting a lot of those. I'm surprised you didn't mention that Forrest Harris is actually one of the members on the University Diversity Council
That
as
is
well.
correct. I'm sorry, I forgot that.
And
You're
actually,
right.
he was on the search committee, if I'm not mistaken, for the new chief of police, if that's correct. I'm looking at Andre or August to confirm that. So
I have to let August confirm that one. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
okay.
Yeah.
But in terms of just the academics, and I think one of the things that allows us to really have those connections certainly is the proximity and being able to have them so close together for the various schools, and whether it's research for individual faculty and collaborating in the various areas, I think that naturally helps, and that's one of the things that's made the FIS Vanderbilt Bridge to the Doctorate program really successful and a model for the country.
But we can do more. We can always do more, and we're pushed to do more because of our resources. And we're in a number of, we're having a lot of discussions around that now with within the chancellor's circle to look at ways we can engage the national community, and particularly historically Black colleges and universities here more. So I would say stay tuned for that, because there are some things coming. You're muted, Val.
Thank you. This is for all the panelists. What advice would you give to the 2021 graduates?
Wow. Well, I would say take that spectacularly unique Vanderbilt University degree and change the world. What does a Vanderbilt education allow you to do? Well, it allows you to grow up in East Nashville, over the Cumberland River in the 60s, go to public high school at East High, and wind up as an engineering graduate at Vanderbilt University. Imagine that, who then goes on to Harvard Med School and does some things with his life. But my journey is just one of many. There are a number of other spectacular examples that serve as phenotypes to show that Vanderbilt can change a life, change a career, and to some extent be part of changing the world. And I think we have that type of national university, international university, and reach. What's the purpose of university? Discovery, learning, creating new knowledge. We're an amazing university at this time in the life of all our peers in America, to be one of those preeminent schools that take it to the next level. Our eminence is great, but we'll be even more eminent. But our students are leaving here, doing it now, changing the world, making it better.
Thank you. How important?
I might say I have a nephew who's finishing here this year, John Churchwell, and I've told him specifically he has to change the world. So there you go.
Thank you. How important is transparency by law enforcement in this current climate? And how do law enforcement agencies communicate effectively while also managing the integrity and safety of sensitive information related to officer safety?
I'll take a crack at that. I think transparency is absolutely important. I think that, some of the things that's going on is that we're not as open as we should be. I think because transparency not only serves your community, but it also is a calling card for your personnel. That that the personnel know that things are going to, there's no cover-ups, that there's no, securing this or securing that we have appropriate transparency. It allows you to work effectively. It encourages, even more effective working. We often, when I used to be in the, it's a long time ago, when I went to the police academy, they used to have us to run a lap around a building, and you used to have to run wide open, and you couldn't stop. And we would all run around, and you have to tell them that you couldn't stop, that you didn't stop. And then we would do that, and they would have video cameras out there, and everybody would run without stopping. And those who stopped identified that I stopped. But then later, they took away the video cameras. And then we had people run, and there were a number of people that said they didn't stop, but they did stop. But they had some hidden cameras, and they was able to show them. And it was the lesson was on integrity. And you should work every day that integrity was based on transparency, that you should work every day like you're being videoed. You should work every day that the work that you do can represent you, your community, and your department. And so I think it's extremely important that we have transparency in law enforcement.
Okay, this may be our last question. We may get to one more. How do you balance people's aversion to the ideal of profiling with the value benefit of using observation and probabilities to help inform and direct investigation?
Wow, that's an academic question. I think, when I look at it, I think everyone, part of the equity, diversity, and inclusion training you go to, everyone have their biases. And I think those biases contribute to profiling. But I think that you have to, in law enforcement, you have to one, understand your biasness and understand the differences in others. And you use that to be able to treat others fairly. Because I think that the history of profiling has proven to be very challenging and quite often wrong. And it's something that really is mostly affected through Black and brown people. And so I would say that we should not be profiling individuals.
Thank you. And I think this is going to be our last question. We must constantly strive to overcome division, racism, prejudice, and disparities. What resources do you personally find helpful to breaking down barriers and understanding each other's stories, as well as to opening doors to conversations between people of different backgrounds, experiences, and beliefs?
I'll take that one. So, the whole data and research around unconscious bias training and education really centers around one really key thing. You can do a number of things to try to mitigate it. You can't get rid of it. You can have people read about notable people who are African-American or brown. But the most important one that seems to be that sticks and makes the greatest change is getting to know people who are different from you in an intimate way. And there's a great technique called the narrative 4 technique that is used by our university chaplain office, run by Gretchen Person, that we use throughout the university to get at this issue. It allows people from different groups to be paired up, different race and identities and ethnicities, and they go through a series of discussions of their life stories, to the extent that at the end of that process, that person, they change their voice. So you now read out as if I was with Valerie, I would read out that I'm Valerie, and this is her history. This is my history. I was born here and there. And there's nothing that breaks down barriers that people getting to know each other in intimate ways, to see more the similarities than the differences. And in doing so, the interpersonal chasm is crossed. And a lot of the issues around bias, particularly unconscious bias, are able to be really severely mitigated to allow discourse that is open and understood. And you're able to have committees that are more diverse, that listen to all voices on those committees.
Thank you, Dr. Churchwell, Chief Washington, and Dr. Robinson. This has been a wonderful discussion tonight, and by the overwhelming number of questions, there are over 20 questions we didn't get to. So we're going to work to get answers and get something distributed out to the list of participants. But this topic seems to be very popular. We may look at maybe doing it again next semester, something along these lines. But thank you for being here, and everyone have a wonderful night and a happy holiday season, and be safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie.
Thank you.